Welcome one and all to Umami Manga. I'm Petter and this is James.
Hello.
And today we're talking about Volume 1 of A Bride's Story. This series is written and illustrated by Kaoru Mori. Some of her other works include one called Emma and another one called Shirley. Just like A Bride's Story, those are also historical manga and even also take place in the 19th century even.
Mm,
But unlike A Bride's Story, they are both set in England during that same time period, whereas obviously A Bride's Story takes place in Central Asia.
hmm
The specific geographic location for A Bride's Story is not completely clear, at least not so far.
hmm
But considering we know that it's in Central Asia and that it's somewhat close to both the Caspian Sea and the Silk Road, my guess is that it's somewhere in Turkmenistan was my
mm.
the little research that I did on it. So,
Yeah, I did a little bit as well, and I think that's around the area where I put it.
right, I believe it would be like somewhere in the southeastern part of the Caspian Sea or around that vicinity, I believe.
Right.
Hopefully that will be clearer as the story progresses though.
hmm
Anyway, speaking of Kaoru Mori just a little bit more, I feel like we have to praise the art that she puts into this manga, at least,
Yeah,
just one volume into it. The sceneries, the architectures, the clothing, everything I think just looks so good, so detailed and beautiful.
it's so true.
Like, it's incredible. Like, each panel almost, or pretty much,
hmm
you just see it and you can really tell like a lot of time and effort and research went into this.
Yes, absolutely that.
It's like I'm no expert on that part of the world nor that time in history, but I think it seems quite clear that she has really done her research in order to pull off that stunning and seemingly authentic styles and things that she portrays. And I've also seen others praise her historical accuracy in the research that she does.
Mm.
Plus, I know that she is very interested in history as a subject. So I think it's very nice to see that reflected not only in her gorgeous art, but also I think in the story, like the way she writes the story and the characters. I
hmm
think it shows that she does this research. It's very nice, I think.
Yeah, really putting the characters into that time period and not just using that time period with modern day ideas or
Right.
whatnot. I mean, I'm
Uh-huh.
sure that will leak in here and there. I mean, that's kind of inescapable.
Mm.
Uh, but I do feel like she is trying to put her characters in that part of the world, in that time, and think, okay,
Mm.
how would they think? What
Yeah.
is going through their mind?
Right. I love that. Yeah. And I feel like at least in my experience with this first volume so far, I feel like she does a very good job with it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Maybe more so than others. And her, at least with the whole thing, which we'll get to, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
about
Mm-hmm.
obviously the two main characters, well, the situation that they are in. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that is such a thing that a lot of modern writers or storytellers would shy away from and not feel comfortable writing a story where the protagonists are like that in modern day, even though it is in a historical setting where the culture is supposed to be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I do, I guess, appreciate the ballsiness of that.
Yeah. Yeah. But I wanted to just really quick echo the details in each of the panels, particularly the clothing.
Yeah.
I mean, having to draw that each and every time is not easy. I wonder as she draws the manga. I mean, I'm sure she enjoys it in some instances, but also it's like, oh, why did I give them such intricate designs?
Right. I mean, and especially Amir, like with all of
Yeah,
her jewelry and things like
the patterns
patterns.
in particular, I feel
Yeah.
like would
Right.
be so difficult to draw each and every time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at clothing, I feel like some tribes still wear that type of clothing even now. It is detailed and very much like what she's drawn. So
Yeah.
it's a credit to her dedication to getting it accurate
For
as
sure.
far as she can.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, James and I are both going completely blind into this series, so there will be no risk at all for spoilers of any kind for future volumes, as we
Mm.
will never have read ahead when we do each of the discussions for this series.
Hmm.
And speaking of the way we're doing this series, we will be, well, the intention is to cover this volume by volume as we do with all of the other shows or all of the other manga that we cover on the Umami Manga podcast. And this is our 10th series that we're starting and
Mm.
doing in this manner. So I think that's quite fun. And to any newcomer who may be interested in knowing what else we do here, we also cover Kaguya-sama Love is War, To Your Eternity, Spy Family, Free Ren Beyond Journey's End, Vinland Saga, Kaiju number 8, Jujutsu Kaisen, Asadora, and Oshinoko, volume by volume, the same way that the intention is to do with the Bride story here. And we also have been doing some little one-shot discussions from time to time on some shorter manga series, such as Uzumaki, Planets, and The God's Lie. So there's a lot of different manga that we read and discuss on here, and well, so far I think it's a lot of fun. And adding a Bride story to the mix, I think, well, is something that I'm very excited about.
Yeah, I was kind of unsure about the series going into it, but I think after the first volume, I'm definitely more excited than I was previously.
Lovely. But brief summary for anyone who maybe it was a while since you read this first volume and you're just curious about what are we going to go through and talk about in this episode. Basically, the summary for this volume is that Amir Halgal marries Karluk Ahon, and by the way, I apologize for some name pronunciations and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
I can't say much more except that I apologize because I'm sure it's not flawless. Anyway, yes. So Amir Halgal and Karluk Ahon marry, and thus Amir becomes part of his family.
Mm.
Amir and Karluk ride out to find Uncle Umak, where they spend the night. Meanwhile, Amir's brother comes to the Aeon house and he tries unsuccessfully to bring Amir back with him. And in this first volume's final chapter, poor Karluk gets sick with a cold, which worries Amir greatly. And that's about what this first volume was, very summarized. But we're going to go through each of the characters one by one and kind of talk more in depth about them all.
Yep.
So I guess without further ado, let's do just that. Starting, of course, with Amir Halgal. Or I guess she would be Amir Ahon now, after the marriage.
Yeah,
Assuming
I would think so.
naming, like family names and stuff, work similarly in this culture.
Yeah. Let me just come out and say, I love this woman. Like, everything about her, it just checks off the boxes of my ideal person.
You know, I'm not surprised.
She's like this protective Onesan that I adore with a mix of tomboy energy. It's she's perfect. She's perfect.
That's awesome.
Karluk is freaking lucky, man.
He is. He really is.
It should have been me.
Should have been 12-year-old James.
Well, okay, maybe not. Maybe not that.
Anyway, well, speaking of the marriage, this 20-year-old girl marries a 12-year-old boy, and that's certainly not something that people would accept these days at least not in our parts of the world.
Nope. Maybe Florida? No, I'm kidding. No. No, nowhere. Nowhere.
No. But of course, marriages like this have happened a lot throughout history, of course, and we know this in probably most parts of the world throughout history, depending on how far you're going back to look. But
Mm-hmm.
I reckon most of those marriages historically have been where there's a guy marrying a much younger girl, as opposed to what we see in this story. I feel like that's probably what's been the most common.
Right.
And I mean, even in this story, their situation is not super strange, but still somewhat strange because even here they're used to, it seems like they're used to the genders being reversed.
I guess so. It's interesting that we have the situation where, as you say, it's more reverse where the woman is younger. So I do wonder, was it common for there to be a 12-year-old who would marry that young? Like, what's the uncommon thing? Is it the fact that she's 20? Well, let me step back.
Hmm.
The distant relatives, they kind of, are whispering among themselves. They don't have an issue with Karluk being 12 and married. They have an issue with Amir being 20 and only just getting married.
Right,
That's
precisely.
their issue. It's like that's what that's the problem here. But different times, different cultures. But I still think it's interesting that we have this situation where a 12-year-old male is being married off. I believe in particularly European cultures, you'd have marriages that would happen between 14 or 15-year-olds. But 12 just seems awfully young.
I wonder. Yeah.
Especially for a guy. So I don't know. Was that... I tried looking up if men marrying that young was common in that culture, but I could only find women marrying that young, which is very sad, but, okay, there's evidence for that. But what about the men? Like, so is this completely Kaoru's own take on this? Like, is she not pulling from examples of history, or is there something she knows that I don't?
Well,
I'm not sure.
I remember reading somewhere when I was reading a little bit about this series that when she had been doing her research, she had learned that, I guess, a average of sorts for marrying age in this part of the world in this time of history was, if I remember correctly now, was 16. And so she took that number and subtracted 4 and added 4 to get 12 and 20.
Oh.
Thus, she kind of sticks to the average being 16 thing, I guess.
Interesting. That makes more sense if that's just how she went about it.
Right, and I mean, I believe it's also partially a little bit to provoke, I reckon, like making it that extreme, kind of. But I'm sure it occurred, or well, probably more so with young girls, sadly. But I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure the age of 12 did or has been occurring.
Absolutely. Is it strange for me to say, and maybe this is just kind of a twisted mentality, that it's easier for me to swallow the 12-year-old being male than a 12-year-old woman? Is that strange? Is that odd?
No, I think...
Call me out on that if it is.
I think well, I sort of get you. And and also culturally and somewhat physically, obviously it depends, but in certain ways, I guess women are more vulnerable than men in some aspects. Obviously it's debatable, and it's obviously not the same for each individual, but I feel like generally I think one can see it that way, and I guess seeing it that way, then yeah, I guess a 12-year-old little girl, you may feel like that it's worse in that way, and I can see that. However, something that I felt when I was reading this, and I know we're talking a little bit about Karluk now, but I think that's fine. But is that he is so mature for being 12. Like, he doesn't really come off as 12, in my opinion.
You don't think so?
Or, well, it depends. I feel like to some extent he seems more mature than your average 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And
I could agree with that.
With that,
but I still think he has growing up to do. But anyway,
absolutely he does. Yeah. But with that, I feel like, well, yeah, he feels a little bit older, and thus the age gap is a little bit, or feels a little bit smaller, even though it's not. But
yeah.
But then you also got to remember that all 12-year-old boys are not like Karluk. So if the story had portrayed a less mature 12-year-old boy, then perhaps we would have felt the same way about a 12-year-old boy versus a 12-year-old girl, like in this type of situation. Maybe. Just a thought.
Maybe. Yeah. And I think it's, to her credit, I think it's easier for readers to swallow that than showing a 12-year-old being married to a 12-year-old girl being married to a 20-year-old man.
Right.
I think that kind of just lessens the controversy a little bit, which maybe that's just an issue with society at large, but whatever.
Right. I mean, right, and I agree with you. That is the case, even though maybe it shouldn't be. But I think that's just how things are, kind of.
Yeah. And to clarify, I'm not saying I want to see it the other way. I do not, absolutely do not want to see it switched. I'm just kind of giving commentary to it. A rather, what I think would be kind of a barrier. It was a barrier for me going in when we were deciding what we wanted to read.
Yeah.
When I read that there was a 7-year gap between the two, and their ages, like what? What kind of story are you trying to get me to read, Petter? And obviously, it is not, lack of a better word, sexualized in any way.
Right.
It's just really a piece on the culture at the time, and taking an aspect and of an age gap like that and putting a unique twist on it, and then giving commentary on how those people in that time era would have reacted.
Exactly.
So I think it makes it interesting in that way.
Right, because we learn about the culture, and like through the story we learn about the culture and the characters, and I think so far into the story it works.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a wholesome and innocent marriage so far, which I do hope it remains for quite a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
But it works as a story. I'm intrigued by this. I mean, obviously, I wanted to discuss it on the podcast, and I think it's well portrayed.
Yeah, I agree. But going back to Amir's, I guess, perspective on this, she seems pretty positive about the marriage, even though she is marrying someone who's 12.
Mhm.
I guess because it is the time period, maybe that's not a huge difference for her. I'm sure she's just glad that she was able to get married, and maybe felt like a burden on her own family at the time. I don't know. I'm not sure how she views herself, to be honest. I don't want to say that women must give children, but back in that time, that was certainly a harsh reality, was that women were supposed to give birth to many children.
Right.
Yeah. And that's another one of the complaints, is that, oh, she's 20. Is she really going to be able to have that many babies? Which I'm sure she'd do fine. I know plenty of 20-year-olds who had very big families. Thank you very much.
Right. And I mean, I guess also, to be fair, in harsher conditions, like harsher living conditions,
You're right.
like it was back in the day, it's harder to, or rather, you need more people to make sure that you even get any that survive, kind of, because maybe several will die young.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Although this isn't the medieval period or anything.
No, you're right about that. That is fair. And I even have reason to think that, because we know it's the 19th century, I even have a bit of reason to think it's even the latter half of the 19th century, but I'll get to that later.
Oh, cool.
So all in all, yeah, I guess it's not all that far back into the past, but still, it's not like modern days.
Yeah. But Amir, I think, is just such a great person. She has this great positive attitude, wants to help out, and not just with the daily chores, but she's like, oh, I'll go catch a rabbit. You guys haven't had rabbit yet? Oh, you haven't been living.
Yeah.
Goes gets rabbit.
Yeah.
There's so much to like about this person. I can't wait to explore her character more and really see who Amir is, and maybe even delve into her mind a little bit more. And does she have some hesitation with marrying Karluk, or is she all in? Does she want to have a big family? Does she not want to? I don't know. I'm curious. Very curious.
Yeah, I'm very curious as well, and I also definitely find myself liking her character a lot. How can't you? Like, she is very, very likable. Yeah. I think she comes off as quite modest in how she isn't asking for much, and she seems rather
different kind of modest.
Wait, what were you thinking?
Oh well, there's a scene where she is embarrassed by her clothes and she quickly takes them
Oh,
off
oh.
and is running around in her undergarments, which was very like is actually more like what people wear nowadays in the summertime, to be honest. But
Right, right.
but to them that was like, oh, super lewd. Like,
So
what are you
lewd,
doing?
yeah. Right, yeah, yeah. No,
So
but
not modest in that way, but
mm,
yes,
mm.
I agree with you. Humble, modest. Yeah, I know.
Right,
I was
right.
playing for the English.
No, but that's a fair point though. Uh, and I think she's pretty capable at adapting to this new home that she finds herself in and the new circumstances that come with that. Like I feel like
Hmm.
she does a very good job at blending, or well, not blending in, but like adapting to that basically.
Yeah.
That said though, she's not leaving her old self behind or anything like that. She's still, maintaining the, or well, I guess we don't know exactly what she was like before this, but she's still,
Hmm.
a proud rider and archer,
Hmm.
and those are things that one wouldn't expect of a woman in this time and age and location and whatnot.
I'm unsure about what her tribe is like per se. Maybe they actually encourage the women to go hunting, or maybe that was just something she did when she was younger and
Mm, mm,
they're a little less strict about that. But as she grew older, they kind of took that away from her. Maybe, not sure. But
mm.
regardless, I agree with you that it is nice to see her be herself, and that the family accepts that and honestly kind of finds that charming.
Right, yeah.
So
It's so sweet,
very, very
so
wholesome.
wholesome, yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And like even though she is proud about her skills and she doesn't hesitate to like show off a little bit, uh she's still humble enough to like not actually like brag or like claim that
Yeah.
like that she can do certain things, or that certain things are easy or even doable to her. Like when she's talking about you need a hawk to be able to catch rabbits in winter, for example. Like you wouldn't be,
Hmm.
it's impossible without one, or that she would never be able to hunt a wolf by herself. She would need
Right.
company. Like she is still humble,
Yeah. Yeah.
but she does start training Karluk's nephews in archery, so that's fun.
Defend themselves against her brothers. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's funny during that whole first chapter, we don't hear anybody's names aside from Amir and Karluk's. They all kind of go nameless, other than.
Mm.
Well, it honestly took me a while to figure out who was who in this family. I could
Yeah.
I could picture who the dad was, and I figured out who the mom was. Obviously, the grandparents, clearly. But it's like who's related to Karluk here, and
Right.
sometimes I had to adjust my eyes to understand which one was Amir,
Oh
because
yeah, right, right.
I couldn't figure out which was her pattern. I understand now, but
Mm,
it was understanding the different patterns and this. Okay, that one's definitely Amir. Understand that,
mm,
but
mm.
yeah, the whole first chapter there was just really no names being dropped, and then little by little, names were dropped here and there. Then you get to the very end of the volume, and she gives the whole family tree. It was like, thank
Yes.
goodness.
That, yeah, I love that. It's so useful. Not only do you get names for all of them, but you also understand like the relations between each of the characters. And
Yeah,
I thought that was really helpful. And knowing that on my second read through of the volume also really helped,
yeah,
and to like really
agreed.
understand. And I feel like this volume does such a good job at like establishing these characters. Like sure, you don't go super in depth on each and every one of them, but I still feel like all of the ones that are well, yeah, all of the Ahon family, like they're all well enough established.
Yeah.
But more about Amir. Something maybe I'm reaching. I don't know, but I did get a bit of a potential feeling about Amir not having been very well treated before coming to to live with the Ahon family.
Hmm.
Um, like
Yeah.
I don't know, abused in some sense, uh, in her old home. For one, and I know this isn't necessarily the way to read it, but for one, she does seem very eager to constantly serve and please people around her, like she does when she goes to hunt the rabbit, or she helps Karluk to another helping of the food or whatever. and I know that's and like she wants to help out in the kitchen. I know it's definitely not necessarily the case, like to view it this way. But I just had the feeling that what if she was just constantly more or less forced to serve in various ways
Hmm.
in her previous home, and that's why she continues to do that now.
Hmm.
And maybe like she wasn't given gifts and whatnot, and like that, and that's how, and that's why it didn't occur to her that the fabric that she was given would have been intended to make for her to make clothes for herself out of. Like
Hmm.
that was another little thing that I could read as something pointing toward that she had a more or less abusive life before, or
Hmm.
abused life before, or whatever.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just behind her back when they're talking about the marriage falling through, and they need to find someone else to marry this person nearby tribe.
Right.
They kind of just treat Amir as a pawn, which
Mm-hmm.
maybe is just common for the time, but certainly not very understanding or really considering her feelings whatsoever.
Right.
I think a reasonable person would have said, "Oh, but we already married her off. Oh, okay, well, can't do anything about it now."
Yeah.
Um, but so yeah,
Yeah.
maybe there is a bit of mistreatment on that. I mean, I there has to be, and I'm sure they didn't like the well. They married her off at 20 years old, and they feel like we finally got rid of her. Now we need her back. That's kind of the feeling I got. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so certainly not a doesn't seem to be a great loving environment.
Right, precisely. Yeah, just in and of itself, what we see of her family, even though it's brief, yeah, it doesn't seem incredibly pleasant. Um, that said, though, I do wonder how she would have acted if she had been at home when her brother came to fetch her. Like, I guess we can't know right now, but
Mm-hmm.
would she have been willing to return with him, or no? Like,
Would she have played along with grandma's little trick there?
right, precisely. Yeah, who knows how that would have unfolded, but I do hope in the next book that we'll learn, or that she will learn that her brother was there, at the very least. I would like for her to find out about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Amir got really worried as soon as it looked like Karluk was down with a cold, and she kept
Mm-hmm.
worrying very much, or yeah, throughout that whole sickness. It made me wonder if Amir has lost someone close to her, like a family member, to a sickness in the past.
I wondered the same thing.
Or maybe she was married before to someone who died from a cold or something like that.
Yeah, I could see that as
Uh,
well.
Especially considering that she is quote unquote old for a bride, then she
Mm-hmm.
would have had time earlier in her life to have had a marriage. And it definitely would explain her immense worry for Karluk here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, and I'm kind of hoping we get some sort of story behind that. Not necessarily it must be that way, but it
Hmm.
could be some great character background for her.
Yeah, I agree. But I thought that chapter was a pretty good lesson in, well, in not neglecting yourself and your own needs and your own health.
Yeah.
Because if you don't take proper care of yourself first, then you won't be able to take care of others at all. And I think a lot of people need to learn that lesson sometimes. Or yeah, it's a good lesson.
Last thing I have about her is kind of more on the romance side. I mean, I know there's an age gap, but
Hmm.
there's a romance trying to be brewed here,
There is.
and it definitely feels like Amir is. To me, it feels like Amir is the one that's pushing it forward. There was a couple looks that she gave him from time to time.
Yeah.
Like toward I think like around the second chapter, she's just kind of look. They're in bed, and she's like looking down at him with a very sly smile.
Yes.
And that's another moment where I was like, gosh dang it, I wish that were me. I mean, I I really felt for for Karluk there.
Uh-huh.
But um, but no, just I mean, she's really trying to raise him up, is what I'm saying.
Uh-huh.
Like she was singing that song. They're riding horseback, and
Mm-hmm.
he goes and catches her guys by hand. It's like, why did you run? And she's like, oh, no reason. And she's holding his hand. And it's like, you sly little, yeah. So
Uh-huh.
I feel very warm feelings about this romance that's brewing, despite the age gap. Sue me.
Right. No, but I feel like, or at least part of me feels like, given the context with this culture and the setting and everything,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's inherently wrong to root for this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're not, like, telling them to have sex. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Well, I mean, that's. Well, let's get to Karluk and we can talk about it.
Yes, let's move on to Karluk now. Such a nice and polite boy.
Yeah. You mentioned he was mature for his age. I definitely see what you're saying.
Yes.
I part of it must be that, son, when you're married, you become a man, and you'll have all of this land for me, because the youngest takes the land according to Kaoru.
Right.
So I'm sure his father, talked him up and told him to grow up in a way.
Hmm.
And so I think he's figuring it out. And Amir being a 20-year-old adult herself, I feel like she has a lot to teach him in terms of being an adult. Clearly not the patriarch of a family, but how to, hunt, how to negotiate or think, and maybe not negotiate, but just little things here and there. And to me, it feels he's learning as their relationship grows.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. For sure, he has a lot to learn. Naturally, he does. But still, yeah. I think he's rather mature for his age, and it definitely has to do with the culture. I feel like that he's been raised
Mm-hmm.
in, that has kind of,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, forced him to mature a little bit faster than, I guess, your average, or at least your nowadays average 12-year-old would have.
Yeah.
But we also see Karluk's father calling Rostam, the youngest kid of
Mm-hmm.
Karluk's
His youngest
youngest nephew, calling him a man
Mm-hmm.
or whatever he said in one scene. So I feel like in this culture, it's really forced upon you very early that you should act like a grown up.
Not the father or the brother-in-law who said that?
My memory says it was the Karluk's dad, but I could be wrong. Let me double check. It's in chapter 2.
Yeah, it's the father-in-law. I mean the brother-in-law.
Oh, it was. Oh yeah, you're right. It was, which makes sense because he's that kid's dad.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, so certainly yes, he is. Karluk is mature for his age. I think it's a sign of maturity is he is accepting Amir as his wife and doesn't care about the gap. I mean that's one step close to grooming, I suppose. But it. I don't know. I thought it was really mature because I feel like she definitely has to have some sort of anxiety or doubts about the whole thing in terms of, oh, I'm 20 years old. People see me as an old hag.
Mm,
How is this going to work out? Why would this 12-year-old boy want to marry me?
right.
But he's just like, nah,
Yeah.
it don't matter.
Yeah. Right. That was nice of him to say.
Yeah, not wishing she was younger.
Precisely.
Either.
Yeah, because I feel like hearing him say that, I think at least that's something to make this arguably controversial marriage seem a little bit better. Um,
Yeah.
and as I said before, like, taking the culture into account, plus the fact that it's all quite innocent and whatnot so
Hmm.
far, I think it's making for a good fiction.
Yeah, I agree.
But he offered to deliver the dagger sheath to Uncle Umak without really knowing much
Mm.
about how to locate him. Uh,
Hmm.
and I was thinking about that, how I feel like I could interpret that in two ways.
Mm.
Either either he just has the overconfidence of a child,
Mm-hmm.
which he is a child, and that he
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't understand how difficult it can be to locate people like that or to track people like that. Um, or you can interpret it that Karluk, being well aware of the challenge, but is still, willing to do it because he eagerly wants to help. Plus, that he genuinely wants to introduce Umak to his wife, which I'm sure is, I guess, the case regardless, or at least that last part. So maybe it's a combination of the two,
Mm.
because without
Yeah, I think so.
without Amir, he wouldn't have been able to locate them.
Right.
And I don't know, do you think it's possible that he counted on her when he offered to do that mission, quote unquote?
Hmm. I didn't think about that. I don't think so. I thought
Yeah.
he was pretty confident that he'd be able to find it, not
Mm,
expecting the uncle to have moved.
right. Yeah, that makes sense, probably.
I feel like that's why. But um, I mean, I'm sure he wanted to be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's at least from what I've understood about his character so far. I think that's a pretty strong trait of his, in that he
Yeah.
he just wants to be a good boy, kind of.
Yeah.
Mm. But ultimately, they share a little kiss
Yeah.
and end up sleeping naked next to one another. But it is
Yeah.
and it is in order to stay warm at night, and so
Yeah,
it
that was her
it's
excuse.
very.
Yes. No, I honestly I don't feel she had any real motive besides that. I'm pretty sure she was just
Mm.
following in traditions.
Yeah,
Although it probably does help that that's her husband, of course.
I mean, right. For one, sure. But also, right, like if it is a legitimate way to stay warm in the cold night, then yeah,
Hmm.
like it just makes sense, kind of. Um, and I liked how Karluk likened himself in that situation to a lamb sleeping with its mother,
I know.
and I feel like that's another thing that really implies that it's a very non-sexual thing between them, right now, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very very big Onesan vibes in my opinion. But
Right.
the idea that they haven't done the deed yet is interesting because by the end of the volume, it seems to be hanging on the thread that okay, she needs to bear a child or at least be pregnant, otherwise they're gonna take her back somehow.
Hmm.
So it almost is like forcing the issue, and part of me hopes that's not the case because
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know at what ages they were actually having children. It just 12 just. I know we're going back to the age gap thing and whatnot, but
No, that's fine.
12 just seems so young to be a father or a mother.
And I mean, looking at like 12, like it's rather likely that he's like that Karluk is not even hit puberty yet. Like, and if like he may not even be able to produce a,
Yeah,
a child. Um.
right.
So
Good point.
yeah. There's that as well.
Yeah. So no, I don't think they've gone far at all. So for the grandma to say that Amir was with child, I appreciate the effort, but that's clearly a lie, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think. But while Karluk was sick, it seemed like he was having a hard time relaxing in Amir's presence.
Yeah.
How did you read that?
I wasn't sure how to read it. I thought that maybe it's one of those I'm struggling to put it to words. Moments where he felt strong attraction to her and maybe felt was starting to feel very warm because of that because
Mm,
that can happen when you feel attracted to a person.
right.
You're very warm. But then on top of that, he was sick, so that just kind of made it worse, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, right.
But besides that, I'm not sure why, unless he was feeling suffocated by her, and just her doing too much. But that really hadn't started until after that moment.
True, true, precisely. Yeah, and yeah, I think my only guess is along the same lines as yours, in that yeah, it's the emotions, perhaps, in him liking her in some sense.
Maybe he is hitting puberty now.
Oh right. Maybe he. I mean, he could be. He is around that age. But yeah, like flustered somehow that maybe. I mean, maybe he has somewhat of a crush on her. You know.
Oh.
Maybe you could describe it that way, and then having your crush watch over you while you're in such bad shape. Maybe it's embarrassing. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
It's definitely not new that she's watching over him though. Like she's definitely done that before.
True.
But while he's in bad shape,
Mm.
that maybe that's just the camel that broke this. Dang it! The straw that broke the camel's back.
Right. Could be. But is there anything else on Karluk?
Nope.
Then let's move on to the other smaller characters.
Okay.
Let's start with Seleke,
Yeah.
Karluk's older sister. She's married to Yusuf, and their children in order are Tileke, Torkan, Chalg, and Rostam. Again, I'm so sorry to anyone who actually speaks the languages that are spoken in this part of the world. I'm probably butchering every single word or every single name. Anyway, I think to me, Selike's biggest part in this volume was, I guess, to see, or in chapter 2, I believe it was, when she tried to be very strict toward Rostam, but in reality, she just didn't really want to punish him in that kind of a way. I thought it was very, very cute, again, sweet.
Yeah.
And I hope that by the end of that chapter, she had learned that she shouldn't perhaps be stricter than she herself really can muster to be. I guess.
Maybe not that extreme.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But I'm glad it shows this side of parenting where, sometimes in media you don't see how hard it is to be a parent in terms of disciplining. You love these creatures that you gave birth to.
Yeah.
It's kind of painful sometimes. It depends on the person, but for some people it can be kind of tough to punish them in any sort of way.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very, very sweet and also very motherly of her to not only be strict but also have the 180. Oh my gosh, she hasn't eaten at all. I'm a terrible mother.
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. No, it was great. I loved. Honestly, I love the depiction of so many of these, even the smaller characters. And even though we're really only one book into this series, I still feel a surprisingly strong connection to a surprising amount of these smaller characters, despite them being so small so far. I'm very excited to see even these smaller characters grow in the future of the series.
Yeah.
Was there anything else on Selike, by the way?
No.
Then let's move on to her oldest child, Tileke. She loves hawks. And
that's her personality.
That's so far. That's basically
loves
her personality. but I think what I, or at least something that got me rather excited about her is was to see how thrilled she was about the idea of hawk training, and how that may be foreshadowing to something that, like, maybe she will train a hawk in the future and go hunting rabbits in winter when she grows a little bit older.
I'm not ready for her to get married off as a 12-year-old. I'm not ready for that to happen. Though I don't know if I want to go there.
I hadn't even considered that, but yeah, no, that's sadly probably a good possibility.
But I think she'll get a hawk. I think eventually there will be some sort of hawk training that happens.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
I wonder if Amir will help out. I'm not sure if she has much training in that, but it does sound like she may be a little bit familiar with it.
Right, I wonder.
So,
Yeah.
regardless, like she needs a hawk at some point. We're at this point that you can't go the rest of the story without it happening. So
Precisely, yeah. It needs to happen.
let's do it.
Yup. Then there's the youngest kid of that family, Rostam, who basically was the star of chapter 2.
Yeah.
In a way.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
I was like, did I miss like some chapters? We're going into like the little kids of the family. What?
Yeah,
No,
but I thought
it was good.
It was, yeah, it was good. It was very sweet. He likes goats because the horns are cool.
Yeah.
And he was very fascinated by the carpenter's woodwork. And I think similarly to how it seems like Tilike might become a hawk trainer of some kind. Maybe this is setting up Rostam's future as a carpenter? Perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. For a second, I thought you were going to go goat herder. I was like, not every fascination we have as a child is what our careers turned out. I mean, look, I would have been a Thomas the Tank Engine Power Ranger if I would have fallen with my dreams.
And I would have been a circus ringmaster.
That's great.
That was
I love it.
Huge dream when I was like 4.
Don't let your dreams die, Petter. No. But I agree with you that carpentry could certainly be a future for him. That'd be really great. What I like about chapter 2 is how we get a little of Rostam here, but it shows the architecture of their culture and how the carpentry works, how they build the houses, and then the women decorate the inside with all these carpets.
Right.
It's such a neat way to kind of set up the culture and get the reader to understand, because I mean 99% of us are very foreign to this, so
right.
it was really cool to see it, and also almost like show off Karu's skill at drawing all this. It's incredibly detailed.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, like beautiful, like woodcraft or whatever, woodwork and everything that came with that. It's amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then we have Sanira and Akunbek, who are Karluk's parents. I mostly have a little thing here on Akunbek, the dad, who I thought made a very good case to support Amir staying with the Ahon family, and I thought it was very sweet of him to call her a valued member of their house.
Oh,
like that was very wholesome, very heartwarming.
Yeah. Agreed. What is his profession per se? Because it seems that they're in a pretty big settlement of other people as well.
Right.
So, what does he do, or is that a job for the brother-in-law or his son-in-law, I should say? Or I don't know. I'm curious to understand. Are they just all tradesmen and they're just trading in various goods?
Like I get the feeling that at least it's to a degree is that. I also wonder if if he's part of a group that kind of runs the town somehow, because he was at like a town meeting of some kind, and I wonder if maybe he has a hand in that to some extent, as well as he seems to be, or maybe this isn't quite the case, but I got the feeling at least that he's somewhat of an administrator of their house, kind of.
What do you mean by?
Like he runs the family, quote unquote.
Oh yeah, he's certainly the patriarch, like that.
Yeah,
he is the head of the family,
and like I guess he makes sure everything runs smoothly. Perhaps, not totally sure, but I'm sure he helps out with some labor and stuff like that as well.
Yeah,
when he's at home,
I would think so.
Then there were his parents, Balkirch and Mahatbek, also Karluk's grandparents, and obviously Balkirch, the grandmother,
Left quite an impression.
Definitely, man, what a boss.
Yeah.
Like yeah, and the way she also defended Amir very strongly against her brother.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Whips out her dowry, the bow, and everything. Yeah,
yeah, like
that
she's
was a great
also
call.
a skilled archer. So like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
story is just full of badass women, and and I guess with the little girl, uh, in her we have a potential future badass.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if Grandma came from a hunting village as well. Then, if that's the
Right,
case, I
precisely.
would assume so, right?
Yes. Oh, that would be fun to find out and learn more about.
Yeah.
Then there's a fellow living with the family called Mr.
Yeah.
Smith.
What are you doing here? As the story goes, this random white guy appears. Hey, what's going on, everybody? What?
Yeah. I'm assuming he's an Englishman.
That's what I'm assuming too. What's all this then?
But he appears to have a huge fascination for their culture and their history. And I guess he's learning as much as he can about this part of the world while he's here.
It makes me think of, if I'm remembering the correct book, have you heard of A Heart of Darkness? I'm not sure what it would be called in Sweden, but basically it's about a man who travels to Africa. I think he's learning about the people there, but some stuff goes down. It's one of those literature classics or whatever, but also controversial. um,
Uh huh.
but it just reminds me, just at the time, I guess a lot of supposed British people, professors, were leaving their universities to go into these less modernized areas, I suppose. I don't know how you want to describe it. To study them and research them and whatnot. It seems to be a stereotype. Whether it was true or not, I have no idea. But it certainly is a thing in media,
Right.
going back and into that time, like time periods, they often have some British professor studying.
True. Right. No, that is fair. Yeah, I can recognize that too. But yeah, I mean, he seems nice at least, and
Yeah, he doesn't seem like a jerk.
I'm interested to see, and yeah, I'm interested to see what else he can give to this story.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think in a way it's a smart move to have an outsider like that who doesn't know the culture and like perfectly, for us readers to kind of, well, if there's ever situations where something needs explaining, for example, and stuff like that, then Mori can use him as an excuse to explain certain things to us.
Yes, I agree.
But anything else on Mr. Smith?
No.
Then let us move on to Azel, Amir's older brother. So yeah, he was sent to bring Amir back so that their family can give her to the Numaji, which appear to be a quite wealthy family. At least that's the vibe I got when they were talking about that clan or that family.
Right.
And how a previous girl that they had sent to them had apparently died.
Mm.
Now, there could be all sorts of reasons for her death. Like, we don't know anything really about why.
A cold.
But, right, maybe it was a cold. But I kind of can't help but fear that, well, fear something terrible, I guess. And that maybe she was killed there. Maybe by the Numaji somehow.
Oh. That's terrible.
But maybe that's a bit of a bonkers speculation. I don't know. But I don't know.
I mean, you never know.
I just got, like, not only did I get bad vibes from the Halgal family or the Halgal clan, but I sort of got bad vibes from the way that they were talking about the Numaji family as well. So I don't know. I'm kind of wary about both of those right now.
Well, whether Numaji is good or not, they can't have Amir. So
no,
that's not acceptable.
They cannot.
I will not stand for this.
No. But anyway, about Azel's failed attempt to bring Amir back with him. I also kind of got a bad feeling there by the very end of that. Like, I don't know,
Yeah, man.
does it seem to you also that he intends to return with more armed men or something? That's, or at least that's how I sort of, or at least
Yeah,
something along those
it
lines.
it certainly feels that way, very threatening. Like,
Yeah,
I have a theory about what's going to happen that I'll save for predictions.
sounds good. Sounds good. Then, is there anything else on Azel?
It's just interesting how Amir says she didn't really have any fights with her eldest brother. I'm
Hmm.
not sure what the age gap between those two are, but um,
Right.
it seems like she got along with him. Uh,
Hmm.
although maybe the same can't be said with her other siblings, so we never heard anything after that. But
Precisely.
uh, I don't know. I mean, maybe they actually do get along pretty well, but Azel is just a victim, I guess, of the patriarchy, where got to do what the elders say, or there's hell to pay. That
Right.
kind of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I guess I could see either way really for Azel right now.
Yeah, I could too.
In in
I could
in
too.
in that way, and for Amir getting along with him, like I guess either they genuinely do get along, like maybe that is the case,
Yeah,
or it just comes to her. It comes down to her being so flexible and adaptable, kind of with people that I think we saw with the Nahon or Ahon family.
that's a good point. It could also be that they just didn't interact with each other, so there would have been
Hmm.
any fights. There probably wouldn't have also been any getting along either.
Right. True. True. True.
So I'm interested to see going forward, potentially that sibling relationship, if at all. Just a little bit more on her family in general, I guess.
For sure.
Her previous family, I should say.
Right, right. Yeah, no, but like really, I feel like more or less every character that were introduced in this book, I'm excited to see more about, like,
Yeah,
either their past or what's to come in their future. Like, yeah, yeah. I think this volume did a very good job at setting up all these characters. I feel like that's the third time this episode that I'm saying that, but I feel like it was very very good. So I guess I can't praise it enough. Um, but do you have any other characters you want to talk about?
did we talk about Uncle Umak at
Not
all?
not specifically, no.
Just a little bit. I mean,
Mm.
there's not much to say, but yeah, he had somebody in his tribe kind of murmuring about Amir's age, but at the end of the day, like, he gave them a lot of wedding gifts and showed a lot of hospitality for them. So
Yeah.
he seems to be a cool guy. He's not really his uncle; it's a distant relative,
Hmm.
and it's cool to see the nomadic lifestyle represented here.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if eventually we'll get to see more of that style, in a future volume of some kind. It just depends how the story goes. If it
Mm.
always follows Amir, or if it drifts elsewhere. But
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess whether or not we see more of Umak, I feel like at some point we got to see at least something of the Halgal family, who are also nomads, except for in winter.
ah, yeah,
So,
there you go.
and I guess to see the difference there, because surely even though they're both nomads, I'm sure there will still be some differences between the two. So
For sure.
that'll be fun to see as well.
hmm Well, for one, it feels like the her family seems to have hunting skills, whereas we don't know for sure, but it does seem that Umak's more of a farmer, or I guess you say livestock herder,
Yeah.
with the sheep.
Hmm.
So in that sense, they could be different as well.
Right. I think so. Yeah, that's a good point.
But anyway, just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. So that's all of the characters.
Yeah.
Great. Then let's talk a little bit about some predictions that we might have for the future of the manga. Speaking of Uncle Umak that we were just on, I just have a very simple little prediction to kick this off with, in that I believe he will come and visit in the next volume because he had those intentions,
Oh,
and I think we'll see that happen.
good point. I think that as we were talking about Azel, I mentioned that I have a prediction. I think
Hmm.
that the brother, or I guess the family, will come back with gifts in exchange for Amir. Maybe. Um,
Oh,
I think that could be the next step, but of course they're not going to accept that.
right, right.
And then I think they may try to take her by force, or kidnapping is also an option. Although I'm not sure how that would work out in terms of capital punishment. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Uh, like, are there any sort of law enforcement around? Like, what, what are the consequences of doing such a thing?
right.
There was that moment where the father goes into a city council type situation, and I'm wondering, did he do that to inform them that, hey, Amir's former family is breathing down our necks, trying to get her
Mm,
back.
ooh,
We need some help. So are they going to have some reinforcements?
right.
Would the village have their back if it did come to arms? I'm not sure what the culture is in this century,
Mm,
but it will be interesting to see how that unfolds.
right. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I also think that Azel will do something in the next volume,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I'm worried about what that might be. I hadn't imagined, as you were saying, like some kind of peaceful trade deal thing. Um,
Yeah.
but I do like that. Like, I feel like that could make sense. Um,
Well, I don't think anybody wants to go straight to conflict.
no.
You know,
Mm,
I mean, obviously they're going to be pretty eager to get her back, but I think that'll be their first idea, and then by force if necessary. But we'll see.
yeah, right. Yeah, I do think they will probably come and cause more distress, and maybe even the Numaji might be problematic
Oh
if they
my,
demand a replacement for that bride who died. Like, who
yeah.
knows? Like, maybe we'll have two problematic other clans here.
I feel like this is my feeling, is that if the Numaji don't hear back from Halgal, I feel like they're just gonna find a new wife, and go elsewhere. And that's not what the Halgal tribe wants, because they wanted the marriage because of the important land to them, is
Fair.
how
That
I feel.
I suppose that's possible, and especially considering the vibe I got about the Numaji being potentially pretty big and wealthy, then they would
Mm,
probably have other options
yeah,
from other directions. Yeah, yeah,
right.
that makes sense.
But for the time, they believe that, believe there's the idea out there that Amir is with child. Um, so whenever Karluk and Amir find out about this whole conflict and potentially that rumor, I mean,
Mm.
it could be quite comedic if she has to pretend like, wrap a towel around her stomach, or something. I don't know, but I think there could be some pressure
Hmm.
for, I hate to say it, for Karluk to have a child, but maybe they talk about it and they're like, I don't know if we're ready for that.
Right.
That could be refreshing to have a
Yeah,
conversation and
for
say, "Hey,
sure.
we're not ready for this."
Yeah.
Although I think Amir is definitely ready, but regardless,
Although she would understand, most likely,
yes,
that Karluk is
I
not
think so.
ready, or
I think
maybe
so.
even physically capable, you know?
uh, it'd be really awkward. It's like, we tried.
uh,
No. I mean, I guess
mm,
that could be the case, but regardless, or let's just not think about it.
uh,
We'll see what happens in volume 2.
we
But
will. We will.
my last prediction is more so a prediction of how the story will go.
Hmm.
in this first chapter, I mean, yes, we were establishing the setting and the culture, but I do get a feeling that this is going to be more of a slice of life historical story and less about a prolonged narrative, where there's like huge arcs or something. Like maybe I'm sure there will be arcs, but I think a lot of it will be just bite-sized, almost episodic pieces. My thoughts as a whole on the series depend on volume 2. Not to say that I could hate it, but I don't know entirely what to expect aside from some wholesomeness, I suppose.
Hmm.
But I think volume 2 will really set expectations going forward.
That is fair, and I hope it will establish a little bit more what it will be more clearly, because I guess I agree. It is, while it is very much slice of life, there are also these, or I guess this potential for something more, I guess, quote unquote action esque or whatever.
Yeah,
Which
I
I
guess.
don't think it's going to lean into that
Yeah, I don't think
a
so
lot,
either.
but I guess who really knows? But yeah,
Yeah, who knows?
it's probably gonna be more so slice of life romance.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting.
Although I am also enjoying the potential conflicts that could come, uh, not only based on what we've been talking about, but something else which I'm going to predict. And this is more of another one, like kind of a long term prediction for the series future, kind of.
Okay.
And it's about the thing that I mentioned earlier about, I believe, or I have somewhat of a reason to think that we're in at least the latter half of the 1800s. Uh,
Oh, yes.
right now, as opposed to the first half of the 1800s, because I happen to know that the Russian conquest of Central Asia was happening more or less throughout the 1800s, and that the
Mm.
region where I'm assuming the story takes place was affected by that conquest, especially in the latter half of the 1800s. So, if A Bride's Story is like Mori's other two works, Emma and Shirley, that I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, in that it takes place in the second half of the 19th century specifically, then we may have some Russian conquest on our hands in the future of the series.
Interesting.
Yes. So yeah, it's not necessarily something I'm expecting to see in like the nearest future, but further into the story, I think it could be pretty exciting to get some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be very well interesting to get that perspective as a war is going on.
Right. And like it doesn't have to be like, or the Russian conquest of Central Asia doesn't need to make the story into like an action story. I
No.
think,
No.
especially since the characters that we're getting to know right now, they're not soldiers or warriors. They're
No.
they're villagers, and so
Except for Grandma
uh,
and Amir. They could take down a few
she can.
few Russians. And
Yes.
no, that's too
Uh,
many.
no, but so yes, like seeing or experiencing that potential war, I guess, that could be arriving, uh, from their eyes and from the perspective of these townsfolk, I think could be, well, devastating for sure, but interesting as well, I think.
Yeah. I like that.
Hmm.
And it builds on the historic aspect of the story,
Uh,
you know.
precisely, it would, and like if it would come to that, then it would narrow down the time frame for us more clearly, as well as
True.
potentially also the geographic location where we're at, which I would like to know more specifically.
Indeed.
But yeah, I guess that's all for our predictions.
Yep. Or actually,
Hmm?
one that I was kind of hinting at towards the beginning about Karluk's niece, Tileke? And this is way down the line, I would hope, but I feel like she's going to be married off, obviously, but I think
Mm.
it could be interesting to see her side of the story as someone being married off into a different family.
Right.
um,
Precisely.
and just get her perspective on things.
Absolutely.
Could be interesting.
I agree.
Please be a little older.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing or another question worth asking is like how much time is going to pass throughout the course of this whole story.
Good point.
Like, and if time or if substantial amounts of time do pass, then how quickly will it pass, and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're right.
So I wonder. I do hope to see some years passing like throughout the course of the manga because I would like to see some of these, especially some of these younger characters, grow up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, have them grow up, but that would also mean that Amir would probably have a child
Yes.
at some point in the story as well. So we'd see her going through motherhood.
Right. That could be fun.
Yeah.
So yeah. Overall I'm very excited for this series, but that was probably quite clear already. But yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to talking about the future volumes. Well, first reading them and talking with you about them.
Yeah, like I said, my opinion on the series kind of hangs on what volume 2 brings, or really just how what my expectations should be. You know, I'm definitely liking what I'm reading so far, and I'm very much connected to the characters, particularly the main two. But I feel like the story is still just getting started. You know.
Oh yeah.
It almost feels like the hook for me. Well, I guess you could argue Amir was the hook. Gosh dang it! But the story hook for me is almost yet to be seen. Maybe, but I don't know. Maybe I'm being
who knows
too nitpicky or something. But regardless, I liked it. So that's what I'll say.
Great. Well, I guess that's all for this week of the podcast then, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so.
Great. And yeah, lovely to have started a new series here. Lots of potential, I think, with this one. And so, dear listeners, if you enjoy our content, you can follow us on Twitter at Umami Manga, and it would be lovely if you'd like to support us by rating our show on the podcast platforms and subscribing to our channel Umami Manga on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time when we'll talk about Volume 2. Bye-bye!
See you later.
Shino, what are you doing? Oh, did you lose your toy in there? Aw.
She's playing with a toy.
She thought, like, played with her toy so that it got, like, in a place that's hard for her to get to. So she's, like, trying to squeeze through between some furniture, and she's not... I mean, she's small, but she's not that small. Oh, now she realized she could just walk around it and grab it that way. I have a very smart cat.